Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Do You Really Know? Today, you'll be wondering who is our next guest for episode number 15. You might be guessing, but he is a wonderful fella from LinkedIn. Let me play the intro, and you're going to figure out who it is. Coming up. Show number 15, Zen Benefiel. All right, let's go ahead and bring in our special guest all the way from Arizona, Mr. Zen. Welcome to the program. Do you really know?
Thanks for having me, Omar. Glad to be here.
How are you this morning? And where did you get the wonderful name of Zen? And I know you have a nickname, Bruce.
So there's three questions right in a row. I'll answer them in order. Let's see. We're being run those past me again. Okay, I know. I'm originally from Indiana. Moved to Arizona in 1981. Zen came about through an interesting experience. I'll just put it that way. I was named Bruce when I was adopted at 6 weeks. I found out at 61 from my birth mother that I finally met that she would have also named me Bruce. In the etymology of the name, it means dweller of the thicket. And I tend to dwell in the thicket of things and like to stir stuff up from there. Zen came in 1988, actually 1990, but it first appeared in 1988. I was sitting with a friend of mine after a full moon meditation that we had attended. It was probably 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. We were having a deep conversation, and I closed my eyes during a pause in that conversation, and I went inside and I asked the question, who am I? Because being adopted and having a bunch of different experiences in my life that made me question who I really am was still present. So having asked the question, who am I, internally, in silence, I heard his chair creak, and I immediately opened my eyes and turned to look at him, locked on his eyes, and the first thing that came out of his mouth was, "You are Zendor." Now, what do you do with that? That's enough, right? Because I hadn't said a word, not one word. And that was his first response to me upon coming out of that pause. Well, at the same time, my second sight, some of you may not be familiar with that term. What it means is this inner vision that we have. And sometimes we have it with our eyes open, sometimes we have it with our eyes closed. This happened to be with my eyes open. I see this starscape with a huge stone arch doorway cast in it and a thick wooden door slowly opening towards me. And I hear door to what is. Well, that was kind of interesting. There's a backstory to that for sure. Well, a couple of years later, I put that on the shelf, told George what was going on, and then just kind of put it on the shelf because, I mean, that was pretty wacky, right?
Yeah.
And try to explain that to anybody and have some semblance of sanity in the process. So knowing that, a couple of years later, had the opportunity to produce my first TV show called One World. And I used Zendor as a subheading under my given name. About 6 shows in, one of my crew, a good friend and cohort in consciousness, if you will, who's a Sikh, or Sikh as it should be pronounced, he called me Zen one night. And it just cascaded from there. All of a sudden, everybody else started calling me Zen. I had Yes, it was great. And at the same time, I had real issues with it because I had issues with people changing their names back in the 70s when I was in college. So here I am facing, something completely on the opposite side of where I was at. So, I learned from that. Don't judge, else you're going to be sitting in that seat
Yeah.
at
Uh,
some point. So that's essentially how that came about. And I've worn that moniker for 30 some odd years afterwards. And being expected to be Zen has really given me a lot of opportunity to grow personally.
that's awesome. That's awesome. That was a good backstory there, a little bit extra than that, but that's beautiful. I love that how you go in there and you explain in detail of how you got it. That's awesome. We all can have that little zen in us, right?
We
All
can,
right.
we just often choose not to. I mean, it's a little spooky cool when that kind of stuff happens in your life because it's outside of your normal experience.
I agree. I agree. And I think you already answered this one, but what is your home state?
I was born in Indianapolis on June 30th of 1957 and grew up in Alexandria, Indiana, which was about 60 miles northeast of there.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And how do you like compared? When did you move to Arizona? And how do you compare Arizona to over there, your Midwest?
Wow. That's an interesting story as well. I'll try to keep it short. And we moved in 1981. I was married, one child, one on the way. I had worked three different jobs: a meat cutter, machinist, and playing drums in a Christian rock band. And all three of those jobs fell through in the same number of days. And it was the result of the auto industry crash in the late 70s. And we were right in the middle of a manufacturing and assembly hub, if you will, amongst several cities that surrounded us. So I walked out on the front porch the next morning. I threw my hands up to the sun and I said, "Okay, I'm listening. Where do you want me to go?" And literally, this is what I did. And the first thing I heard was Phoenix. So I was like, "Oh, okay. I've always wanted to go to Arizona." And 3 weeks later, we were packed up and headed out here. And we arrived in April of 1981.
Oh wow, that's awesome. I was in Arkansas before, and we moved here in 96, 97. We just basically I skipped 1 year. We moved to Arizona. I did middle school here for 1 year. My parents loved it. We went back to Arkansas. Like we're deciding to move to Arizona, so we came back the next year. So it was weird. I think sixth grade I spent 1 year here, and then seventh grade over there, and then eighth grade permanently back in Arizona.
Mm.
So it's
Well,
kind of interesting.
for me, it being in Indiana didn't really want me. Uh, my, and I'm not saying this to self-aggrandize, but my intelligence, I couldn't find anybody that really made me, or not made me, because nobody makes me anything,
Yeah,
that allowed me to feel completely comfortable, open, and honest in my experiences and my thoughts and how I saw things. Um, so even going through high school and, was a stellar student, athlete, went to college on a pre-med program, tested out of 5 quarters going in, and then found out that it really wasn't for me um, because of an experience I had. I prayed to know what truth was, and I was willing to die for it if necessary. And then a few days later, went through that whole process and kind of got my marching orders for life, of which led to being in Phoenix, which
that's
is
awesome.
Arizona is a most wonderful. Indiana, climate changes and things like that wasn't the most comfortable place to live in environmentally. Arizona, I love the heat, and I can go any direction 4.5 hours and experience any kind of climate I want.
That's beautiful. I like that. All right, if you're ready, I'm ready for the next question. Let's go. Okay.
Let's go.
What is your favorite U.S. state to visit? If you visit any other place other than Arizona, where will
You
you
know,
go?
I've,
What is
I've
your best? Yeah.
I actually spent some time traveling the country, doing front of house merch for a couple of children's theater shows. So I pretty much visited every state. Previous to that, I had spent some time with a fundraising go-kart um, race company that did corporate fundraisers for organizations like Miracle Network and Visiting Nurses Associations, things like that. So I spent some time in Hawaii. I would say there's a mix between Hawaii and Colorado uh, was really beautiful, although the seasons there. Um, I'd have to say Hawaii is probably my favorite U.S. state.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, let's continue. And if you guys are watching, please do join us. There are some people who are doing likes in there and comment. We have Zen, a wonderful guy from Arizona. If you don't know him already, definitely connect with him. He's been all over. He's been on the Don Cohn show. He's been all over the place. So awesome. Okay. All right. Favorite natural food to eat?
Oh gosh, my wife and I, Luba, we really have a clean diet, and so I don't know that I have a favorite natural food. I am our chief cook and server because I
Yeah.
love to cook. I'm Cancerian by birth as well, and so I have a tendency to want to nurture everyone in all the ways that I can in being helpful. Right, one of those is being able to feed you great food, as
Yeah.
well as me. I find that probably, um, oh gosh, hmm, fruit or vegetable. Gosh, I'd have to say, as a fruit, probably um, Honeycrisp apples, and as a vegetable, I'd probably say, hmm, that's a tough one because there's so many good
So many
vegetables.
good.
I
Apples are
don't know that I
good.
could give you a favorite.
What
And
is
it's
your
funny how
yeah.
folks would, well, what's your favorite? And what's your favorite music? What's your favorite band? Do we have to have a favorite?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the word favorite makes it just so push, I guess, right? I mean, you could always say, I like watermelon or I like apples, but then, yeah, the word favorite just pushes through, but it's the most favorite of everything. And
I
so,
like it all. I don't. I can honestly say I really don't have a favorite.
So here's the interesting thing about I'm going to mention the Bosnian language. So they have the word for favorite, but if you add something that's the most of it, you add a prefix to it to make it emphasized. Like that. That's
Mhm.
like, for example, the word you nigh in front of it. So let's say the word, for example, we want to say best, like best, right? It's boli. If you add nigh boli, this is the super best. And so they have this word in Boston where you're actually pushing it through and making it extremely the best. So it's very odd compared to like English. So
Right,
yeah,
right. And the funny thing about prefixes and suffixes,
yeah,
we have words that have some but don't have the opposite. And I just find that kind of odd. I won't give you an example because
yeah,
we've got limited time here.
yeah. And we want to say hello to Kelly, a good friend of ours from the Don Cohn show, and she does her own show as well. The Awesome Journey. She was on this program a couple of times ago. Happy Sunday, all. She's awesome. She's also in Arizona as well. How
Oh, very
three of us
good.
are in Arizona. That's
Hey,
interesting.
Kelly,
You need to connect if you haven't with her.
great to
Okay.
have you here.
Yeah, excellent. All right, let's go to the next question. If I would travel to any country, where would I go? Have you been
Russia.
outside the USA? I'm sure you have.
That's
And
an
where would
easy
you go?
answer. Russia. We hear too
Russia.
much crap about it. My
Yeah.
wife's from Russia. I'd like to go there and experience it just so I know for myself and not listen to anybody else's predilections, perspectives, or opinions about what's going on there. Because from my discoveries, it seems like a really solid place that people are well taken care of there.
Exactly, exactly. It's always better to go yourself there than to watch the media and pay attention because it's a lot, 90% difference. Absolutely. Anywhere you go in the world.
Mhm.
That's what I would say. All right, let's continue. Okay, your best novel or book you've ever read in your life. This is again a very extreme one, but you can always narrow down to a book you've read. It doesn't have to be in your life. Could be something you've read recently.
Hmm. I'd say the one that gave me the most cause for pause and introspection, as well as curiosity, was the Rancha book.
Uh huh.
And you may not be familiar with that. It's a collection of papers that were delivered through what's known as channeling um, from, I believe, the late 20s
Uh-huh.
up to the early 30s that were compiled and put together in a book and published in 1955. And it has basically three sections of it: the material and spiritual hierarchies of the universe. Then it's got a section about what it calls Urantia, which is the name that they apply for Earth. And then the last section is on the life and teachings of Jesus.
Oh, okay. That's
About
awesome.
it's about 2,000 pages.
Oh, wow. What is the name of the book again?
Urantia,
Sure.
Urantia.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll definitely check it out. Yeah, put it maybe later in the chat box for me, and I'll check it out. Urantia. It's about 2000, so it's a big book.
Yeah,
How? When was it?
there's another book that was similar that came out of Turkey, and it's
Uh-huh.
called The Knowledge Book.
Hmm. Okay. Interesting. Similar to the same topic.
Yes, from a different perspective.
Okay, that's awesome. So, how old are these books? Like, were they recent?
Um, I think the Knowledge Book was published in the early 70s, and the Urantia book was published in 1955.
Okay. Oh, wow. So there's some time. So that has a lot of good history in it, I'm sure, in terms of their perspective at the time in writing
When it
them.
explodes things that most humans never even consider, let alone dive into to try to understand.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's awesome. Okay, let's go to the next question. Tell me something of a particular person you interviewed that stood out to you or for you. I know you've done many interviews. I've tried to watch most of them, and the other show that you do, which is One World in a New World, that's a wonderful show. I saw the recent one you did. I think with Michael. Was it Michael who did a
Yep.
program a few days ago? He's an interesting character. I listened to his
Yeah, Michael
audio,
Potterano. Yeah. Right
and
now, we've got 14,000 subscribers, and on Valentine's Day, we reached 900,000 views.
oh
So
wow,
I'm really happy with that. There's a lot of effort in that.
that's awesome.
Um, who I've interviewed that stood out for me, you know, I don't think it was one of any of the many interviews, including Dr. Irvin Laszlo was one of my favorites. Short but impactful. Um, one that I really treasure is an opportunity, a series of conversations I had with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth man on the moon. I was running an event. I was hired to do all the logistics for an event here in Phoenix, of which he was speaking at. And I got the chance to meet and speak with him several times over the weekend and shared stories. I've got some pretty wild stuff in my background that is on the otherworldly side. And him having been to the moon and starting the Institute of Noetic Sciences for the study of consciousness afterwards, we had a lot to talk about because I was really curious about what his personal experience was. And over the weekend, we had several conversations, which culminated with him saying, I want to tell you something, but you got to promise not to say anything till after I'm dead. This was in 1997.
Yeah.
So I understood the nature of where he was at and what he was doing. There's probably some stuff he knew about or did it or had experienced that he wasn't able to talk about because of the hush that our intelligence system pretty much has on things. So he says to me, as soon as he was the pilot for the lunar excursion module, for you guests who may not know who he is, and I think it was I forget the mission number. Anyway, he was a sixth man on the moon. So on the way down, he said there was a metallic silver cylinder that spiraled around the LEM all the way down to the surface. He couldn't tell if it was piloted on board or from the surface. It definitely wasn't anything from Earth.
Oh wow, wow.
And for a guy with his degrees, intelligence, experience, and training to say that, that's huge.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There was a guy I had watched. It might have been the same guy. He was an older guy. I think he was in Europe somewhere, either Germany or Hungary, and I found that interview very fascinating. Do you know who I'm talking about? He's an older gentleman. I think he won the Nobel Prize or something like
That's
that.
what I was talking about earlier. That
That's the
was
same
Dr. Irvin Laszlo.
Irvin also. Yeah, that
He was he
fascinating
was 90 years old
guy
when
at
I
that time.
interviewed him. It was such a life, culminating. It was really a high point for me.
That
Just to
what
hang
year was
out.
that? How long ago was that?
I'm sorry.
How what year was that? How long ago?
That was about a year and a half ago, perhaps.
Okay. Is he still doing work? He's still around?
As far as I know, he's got over 200 books. I
Uh-huh.
feel, I've got 33 now. I'm still pale in comparison.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I'm actually trying to find that one particular one here and just show everybody, but it's been, I think it's, oh, I can't find it here. But anyway, I will put it in later. But yeah, he's such a fascinating guy, and I actually listened to most of it. And your interviews are so fascinating. The way you talk, the way you come up with the question. I even was on your program as well. I think it was in the summertime.
Hmm.
It's almost going to be a year almost, but I can't believe that. But you just have some unique ways of approaching it. Like you have this talent that not a lot of people do these days. So it's I
Well,
appreciate you.
insight and wisdom comes from experience, right?
Yeah,
I've read a ton of books, I've written a ton of books, and yet there's a certain thing that comes from the experience, the intuition, the curiosity to to find out more, to discover. And oftentimes when people, it's like we speak in logic trains, right? And we like to connect all the cars, and sometimes the caboose is just not quite connected yet. And there's something, I can see the caboose, and there's a way to connect the dots in a, I call it kind of an Evo leap in the conversation. It's a generative kind of moment
uh-huh,
where a question I ask of my guest, they've never been asked before. And it's because of what they've just talked about in their own progression of self-awareness and development. So, we have these sequences of knowledge gain, if you will. And then where do we go with it? How do we apply that to our future, our lives, our relationships in ways that are positive? Otherwise, we don't necessarily want to carry that with us now, do we? There's no carry-ons on this flight, that's for sure.
oh, you're absolutely correct on that for sure. So yeah, definitely some good points. Let's ready to go to the next question on that. And I did locate the video, but as I tried to share my screen, I had some kind of a tech issue. I have one monitor today, but normally I have two when I do my game
And
show.
that's kind of unusual for you being a tech trainer.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I'm using a different browser, but then for some reason, when you it's blocking it on, I'm using
Yeah,
not
well, I'm
Chrome,
used to getting blocked.
but that. Yeah, it's a weird experience. That's okay.
I'm trying
Anyway,
to work on that one. You got to put a crack in the door before you can open it.
exactly. Okay, what was the turning point in your life in which you wanted to make your own program? Which we're talking about the One World in the New World program, or in person as well, because you've done
Well, that's a
like you had.
continuation of my of the show that I began with. Coming out of the '80s, I worked for an aerospace company. I went through a divorce, had 4 kids. I got expelled from the church, or tried to, because of how their opinions of what I was doing, which was conducting New Age discussion groups
Yeah,
outside the framework of the church. Right? They didn't look at that too kindly. So after all of that, everything just kind of disappeared, kind of like with my jobs,
yeah,
moving to Arizona, right? Same pattern. So it was still uncomfortable, and yet I recognized it. I knew that there was going to be an opening for me afterwards. So I had gotten involved with a group of folks and been asked to help coordinate the Earth Concert 1989 here in town. And it didn't really work out. It was supposed to be part of a 32 city telethon for fundraising for ecosystem regeneration projects. Didn't work out. However, in giving a presentation to the Christown Lions Club, the president kind of liked who I was, and said, "Hey, there's this guy I want you to meet." He was directing their uh, public access television show at the time. He said, "I think you guys would get along and just have some fun together." So I met the guy. I ended up, he asked me to come work with the crew. So I went through the training and started working with the existing crew. And I was on the graphics generator one night, and he turns to me and he's kind of upset because of the host wasn't really all that, he calls them talent, right? They weren't that much or that cooperative in taking cues as to how to do better. And so he turns to me, he says, why don't you do a show? You got all the contacts. We could do a new age show, and it would just really have some blast with or a blast with it. And
Yeah.
I looked at him and said, I'd love to, but not new age. That's a kiss. Calling it that would be a kiss of death. So we considered what to call it, and ended up with One World. Surprising thing was when I first heard that he was a director of a TV show, my initial thought was, wow, wouldn't it be cool to have my own show? And so it was about 9 months later, it dropped in my lap.
Oh wow.
So the whole point of the show was to peer into the depths of what makes us angry, ignorant, immobile, afraid of moving forward or addressing our fears in order to achieve our own personal and or professional development. And so I had over 120 interviews of people. Most of the shows had two people from diverse backgrounds on it that I would speak with about those topics and the questions. And then I would weave a kind of a coherent summation of what both of them were saying in different ways that was actually the same thing.
Oh wow. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Heck of an
So
education.
it's amazing. So what I was gonna say then is that 2020, is that when you really started with the
It's
One World? Or was it?
2021. It was April of 21 that Luba came to me and said, hey, I really think you ought to be doing this. And so June 1st, I aired the first show. I had some really fortunate guests, the low-hanging fruit, if you will, that was available to me through a systems thinking symposium that I had attended. And one of those was a guy named Daniel Wall, who took me a year to finally get on the show. But there were several that I probably got a half dozen shows,
That's
to
awesome.
begin with, to get started. And then that gave me the ability of looking elsewhere and finding people through this robust platform known as LinkedIn.
Oh wow. Yeah, and you have a lot of followers in there too, and that's great. Did you also do you did an in-person show? You've done that before 2021, right? Like before 2020, even with the COVID, you've done a few of them in person, right? From what I
Um, yeah, well, I did I co-hosted a podcast with cohort mentor, 20 years my senior, called Two Small Biz Guys. He does peer advisory board groups that he's been doing for 35 years. He was a member of YPO, sold his companies. I think he was in his mid 40s, and then
okay,
started doing peer advisory boards.
it's awesome.
And then before that, didn't really do much live. I did some for a show coming out of One World. To begin with, I was offered a commercial project, and so I did some live interviews. One of them that I really enjoyed was interviewing the runners for the Indigenous 500-year run called Peace and Dignity Journeys. And there was a group of natives that started in Anchorage, Alaska, and one in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and they met in Mexico City. This was 1992, to celebrate 500 years of making it through the white man's genocide.
Got it. Got it. Perfect. Makes sense. Awesome. Appreciate that. Okay, and I think there's two more questions. Favorite hobby?
Two, golf and playing my drums.
That's awesome. Is there any particular music that you play with your drums, or is just random?
I'm a
Just
progressive
just jazz.
drummer with jazz, rock, blues,
Oh
world
wow.
beat kind of stuff. I've got a 10-piece kit that I'm playing on now, and I just enjoy the way that I can flow with the music, pretty much anything, pick up the beat, add fills, have that creative, innovative flair, and that helps me in my other projects as well. Golf, not so much, because you got to be really precise and let the club do the work.
Yeah.
However, it does teach you a lot about being in the Zen moment,
Yeah.
because you have to be just totally focused, and because your previous thought will affect what your swing is. And if you think in the middle of your swing, which we always have the tendency to do, what,
Yeah.
70,000 thoughts a day, something like
Yeah.
that. Can you be quiet just long enough to swing a club? Right.
I know.
But
There's a
still,
lot of things
at
you
my
think
age, I
about.
play twice a month and I shoot in the mid 80s.
Oh wow, that's awesome. Yeah, my dad's close to your age, a little bit older. He plays every Friday, and he's been doing it for like 5 6 years now, for a while now. And so yeah, it's a disciplined sport, and he does tennis twice a week as well.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's a definitely a different thing. Even my grandfather in his late 80s, he died I think 91 or 92, and he played tennis when he was 90. So
Mhm.
the genes runs in the family, and they kind of enjoy the sports. And the people from the Yugoslavia are very good in terms of tennis. There's a lot of players in that, right?
Absolutely.
So it kind of
Absolutely,
like
and
so
that's a phenomenal sport. The discipline thing, the difference that I find between golf and drums, golf is you got to completely empty and swing the club how it needs to be. It's very precise, and playing drums much the same way. However, it's like Csikszentmihalyi says in Flow, the psychology of optimal experience. It's like a jazz quartet jamming. Time disappears, ego disappears. You're just playing you become your instrument. And in the conversation, there's all kinds of words and punctuations and pauses and all that kind of stuff in the flow.
yeah. Wow, amazing, amazing. That's awesome. All right, here's a question I asked everybody. If I would invent an item to help mankind, what would it be? Could be an item, an idea. People have said many things to cure different diseases, invent a different machine to help people out, kindness kind of thing. What would Zen want to invent to make the world better?
Fearlessness in loving and being loved.
That's a good one. Definitely a good one. Because yeah, a lot of the times, fear causes us to hate and block each other due to ignorance, and so we need to find ways to get out of our ego and go
Mhm.
closer and get to know that person. Because, and like you said, you had a Sikh friend, and I had a few Sikh friends too, and they're wonderful people. So we need
Uh,
to go
and
out
I
and
met
not.
my wife at a Kundalini yoga teacher training
Wow.
graduation. It was
Uh-huh.
hers, right? And so it was being taught by a really well-known guy here locally named Savak, who's a Sikh, right?
That's awesome.
So that depth of understanding and training to even practice Kundalini, yet alone teach it, is just phenomenal. So I really got a wonderful gift um, in how we were brought together, and the life that we're leading now as a result. It's phenomenal. She's a piano pedagogue from St. Petersburg, Russia,
Oh,
as well. And so between the practice and her piano studio, there's another instrument, extremely difficult. Um, and the discipline that it takes. As a pedagogue, she understands the time of the compositions, who wrote them, what the social norm was like at the time, and all that kind of stuff as well, and teaches this to her students. And then there's the technical aspect. When you're using two hands playing two different clefs, your brain is operating in a much higher capacity, which allows you to have even more. It's one of the things where they say, music and science and math, when you study music in any way, especially classical and piano, to be specific, it accelerates your ability, your intelligence level, uh,
yeah.
perceptively.
Absolutely does. I mean, I think that's why my parents at a young age, 10, 15, we had swimming classes, we had tennis lessons after school. All this stuff really engages us. Um, I'm glad I was born in the era without cell phones at the time. So it
You,
wasn't
you me
really,
both, right?
yeah,
I'm,
it's like
I'm
I
I'm a
said,
bit older than you, I think. Um, but what back to your question though, is what I would create. The fearlessness and loving and being loved. Our core desire, I believe, from the years of experience, is to love and be loved, and we do all kinds of things to get in the way of that. Personally, things we aren't even aware of, because of the perspective that we have or the judgment that we carry or the opinions or all of those kinds of things, rather than being open, honest, vulnerable, and conversant with others and sharing. This is part of what one world and the new world leads into, is that we're bereft of the inner conversations, not within ourselves, because we talk to ourselves all the time. Right? And we have inner experiences that we don't necessarily share with others because they're kind of bizarre and they might think we're crazy.
yeah,
Well, we live half inside and half outside. And we've made a mess of the outside, probably because we don't understand or have made a mess of the inside too. So, how do
right.
we clear that up? We begin talking about how we connect with the inner voice, the guidance, the intuition, our spirit, our soul, whatever, guardian angel, however you want to term that. And then be able to get comfortable with talking about that more openly and sharing experiences, because many have them. Right? This is an integrative factor of creating a planetary civilization that's cohesive and is supportive of one another and not destructive toward one another. And that's the shift that we're going through, in my opinion, coming out of COVID.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Definitely good points there. All right, appreciate you being here on the show, Zen. Any words for our viewers? Any last couple, maybe sentence or few words here? And they can check you out on One World New World. How often, as well, do you put a post of a show? Is it every week? It depends.
We have
Uh,
new shows that air every Wednesday. So happy Hump Day. That's my gift for the Hump Day.
yeah.
And my part of what I'm able to bring to that is decades of transformational coaching. And so that's one of the things that I'm able to offer is deep discovery. Everybody has a dream that they want to achieve. I help them do that. And in so doing, my business, I launched it back in 1988, or at least registered the name. And it is with purpose. It's Be the Dream.
Oh
So
wow,
that's what I help people do, is be the dream.
that's
Theirs.
beautiful. I love it. I even love the name. Be the dream. I mean,
BeTheDream.com is my coaching site.
that's awesome. Check him out, Mr. Zen Benefiel. Has a wonderful name. Even looking at Zen makes you just so amazing. Just check out his website. Check out him, and hopefully we gotta meet because you are in Arizona. One of these days when I'm in Chandler, I was there last weekend. They had a breakfast event. Definitely next time they do that, I will invite you and your wife. We would love to
Oh, that'd be
meet with
great.
you. That would be
That'd be
great to
great.
meet you. And let me go ahead and end the stream. Thank you guys for joining us on this wonderful show. We're going to be have next week another wonderful person from LinkedIn. Her name is Martha. And then after that, the week after March, we're going to have a good best-selling author, Zana, a good friend of mine that I met. She's in the East Coast. She's number one on Amazon, and so we're excited to have her as well. So it's going to be an exciting and as well on the side note, check out my Zumberly Kids program. They'll be uploaded pretty soon. We taped 7 shows. Wonderful kids from all over the world. It's about 5 countries, I would say, and they're smart kids. Thank you guys. Thank you, Zen. We'll
You're
talk to you
doing
next
some
time.
great stuff, Omar. I'm really impressed and wish all the best for you. One more parting thing that I would invite
Yeah.
folks to do is take a look at planetarycitizens.net. This is the next phase of my life.
Oh wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you, Zen. Appreciate that. And let me end it, and we'll talk here in a second. See you.